This is episode 27 of the Relentless Man podcast. Tao Te Ching, part 2. Hi, and welcome to the Relentless Man podcast. I'm your host, Christian Mojaiso, and my goal is to help men die empty, to make sure that you die having used up every ounce of potential that is trapped within you. However, to help you die empty, I'll have to be very raw and brutally honest with you. So if you're easily offended, stop listening. If you're easily triggered, stop listening. If you can't handle explicit language, stop listening. If you are fragile, stop listening. Otherwise, let's dig in. Before we begin this episode, I'd like to urge you not to blindly copy or implement anything that I say in this podcast episode. Rather, what I recommend is that you think for yourself, that you turn on your own brain, and that you make sure that the decisions that you make are the product of your own thinking and decision-making process. Remember, do not be a follower, be a student. In this episode, we're going to continue in our investigations of the Tao Te Ching. We started talking about it already. This is part 2 of it. We started talking about it in the previous episode. So, if this is the first episode in the series you're listening to, then the Tao Te Ching is it's a text. It's translated to the Book of the Way, originally written in Chinese, and it was written through a guy called Lao Tzu. And Lao Tzu was an enlightened master. And in this book, he basically outlines the principles of living in harmony with the world and with yourself. And actually, honestly, if you mastered this text, you've basically mastered life. So, but why am I bringing it up? Why is this text important for a relentless man? Now, being a relentless man means being the sort of person that dies empty every single day. Dying empty means using up all of your potential. Now, you have a lot of potential within you. You have physical potential, you have mental potential, you have psychological potential, you have social potential, you have creative potential. There is so much potential trapped within you. Another piece of potential that you have is spiritual potential. And of all of these pieces of potential, spiritual potential is the most important, because out of it, everything else flows. And as a matter of fact, the reason why it's important to understand your spiritual potential, because understanding your spiritual potential will also enable you to understand who you are. And that's one of the most fundamental questions you need to answer. The question, who am I? Once you answer that question, you basically become unstoppable. And that's what we are going to focus on here. Most of the people on the planet have not answered that question. And unfortunately, no one can answer that question for you. Even I can't really tell you who you are. That's something you have to discover for yourself. So basically, this episode is designed to just give you the ideas, and then hopefully that sparks you to discover for yourself who you are. In fact, if you don't discover who you are, you'll never realize your true potential, and you cannot be a relentless man. Alright, so before we be looking at the Tao Te Ching, we did the first chapter, the first verse. It has 81 verses. We did the first verse, and now we're on the second verse, the second part of it. So let's continue in the exploration there. It says, being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. Long and short define each other. High and low depend on each other. Before and after follow each other. So what does this mean? I'm no expert at this, so I'm figuring it out as I go along. That will become evident soon enough. So, being is all about, try to explain being. Being is all about being in tune with the present moment. So for instance, if let's say someone is talking to you and you're completely focused on what the person is saying, when that happens, we say you're being in the moment. Non-being would refer to you not being in tune with the present moment. So let's say someone is talking to you and you're thinking about what happened yesterday, the person that insulted you in the morning, what you're going to do 5 years from now. Once you do that, you're not being. You're in a state of non-being. So here, Lao Tzu is saying that being and non-being create each other, which means that being creates non-being and non-being creates being. What does that mean? Well, part of it is if you're really in tune with the present moment, if you're completely in touch with what is happening right now, well, once you understand what that means to be, you also understand what it means to not be. That is, the state of being in touch with the present moment creates the state, enables you to understand the state of not being. So being creates non-being. And the other part is non-being creates being. What does that really mean? Well, non-being refers to when you're not in touch with the present moment. And that is actually the source of all the problems we have. Think about it. If you're stressed, what's happening? Either you're thinking about a horrible past that you had, what people did to you, or you're thinking about a horrible future that hasn't happened. Either way, you're not in touch with the present moment. The fact that you're thinking about a horrible future or think about a horrible past is what causes stress, anxiety, and depression. So you see, non-being creates all of these states of depression, anxiety, fear, etc. So what does it mean to say that non-being, when you're not in touch with the moment, when you're thinking about the future and the past and not really seeing what's going on right now? What does it mean to say that that creates being? What that means is that usually if you are in non-being and you're depressed and you're suffering, usually what's happening is that intense pain follows. And this intense pain is hard. That's why it's not a good idea to label things as good or bad. Because the intense pain is usually what causes people to awaken. It's what causes people to realize that when you're really, really depressed, you reach a point where the depression is too much, you can't take it anymore, and you're looking for an alternative. Once you do this, you've begun the process of moving from non-being to being. So that would means that when you're not in a state of being, when you're in depression, when you're sad, when you're miserable, when you're anxious or fearful all the time, when you're in this state pushes you, could propel you, not for everybody, but it could propel you to a state of being. And so that's what it means to say that non-being creates being. The next part of this stanza says, difficult and easy support each other. That's an interesting concept there. That is, difficult things support easy things, and easy things support difficult things. What does that really mean? Well, if you look at anything that's difficult or complex, let's say, a complex theory, okay, a complex philosophical theory or complex mathematical theory that you probably learned in school. If you look at it carefully, you'll notice that even if it's complicated and difficult, the theory is made up of small parts. It's made up of small ideas. And those ideas in themselves are simple. And these simple ideas are what support the entire theory. So if you're not really into theories and you don't work with those things so much, well, think about something like a car. A car is complex. It consists of many parts. It's a difficult thing to understand. But if you break it down piece by piece, you'll realize that a car is made up of simple pieces, easy to understand pieces. Maybe there's just a bolt, maybe there's just a tire. If you look at the engine, there are various screws. So those are easy pieces that are supporting the entire complex whole, which is the car. And that's what it means. That is, easy things, the easy, simple pieces support the big, difficult, complex thing. But what does it mean to say that difficult things support easy things? Yeah, think of anything that's easy to do. Let's say maybe walking is easy for you to do. So walking is an easy thing. But if you look carefully at it, the mechanisms that enable you to walk are very complicated. If you went on the cellular level and try to understand how the cells enable you to walk, if you went and looked at your bone structure and tried to figure out how does the bone structure enable you to walk, if you went into your brain and figured out how does the brain send instructions to the body to enable you to walk, when you decide to study all of those pieces of the puzzle, you realize that walking is, while an easy task, it's supported by so many difficult and complex processes. And that's what it means to say that difficult supports easy. And so the phrase now becomes difficult and easy support each other. Difficult things, easy things are made up of difficult things. And difficult things are made up of easy things. And why is this useful for you as a relentless man? Well, for instance, if you have a goal, right? So if you're a relentless man, you're trying to do something that seems impossible to you and very likely to your community. Maybe you've decided that you want to transform the world by colonizing Pluto. Okay, Pluto is no longer a planet. Fine. Jupiter. Okay. you've decided that you're going to be the first human to land on Jupiter. Now, this is something that's never been done before by any human as far as we know. And in fact, the sort of thing that everybody will call you crazy for. It seems like a very complex, difficult task that we can agree on. But you see, the Tao Te Ching here is saying that, look, sure, going to Jupiter seems difficult and complex. But you see, the complex and difficult is supported by the easy. So if you broke down the steps it would take for you to land on Jupiter, then you'll realize that even a journey as complicated as going to the planet Jupiter consists of certain simple steps. And if you start with those, you begin to eventually amass the steps necessary, and eventually you get yourself to Jupiter. And this is really true of any complex project that you can think of. Anything difficult, let's say you're trying to learn, if you remember that it consists of small pieces, that it's made up of easy pieces that you can understand, once you know that, then nothing seems too complicated. Nothing is impossible for you, because you can always break it down to its composite pieces and tackle each of those simple steps, which will enable you to tackle the whole, something that looks difficult at the very beginning. The other part of the stanza says, long and short define each other. I think this is pretty clear. When we say that something is long, it means we have an idea of what something that is short is. That is, we've defined something to be short, and once we know that something is short, we know what it means to not be short, that is to be long. And if we have something that's long, we know what it means to not be long, and so we know what short is. That is, when you talk of something being short, you also know what it means to be long. When you talk of something being long, you also know what it means for something to be short. The two words define each other. And then the second one is high and low depend on each other. So when it comes to this one, what does it mean to say that high and low depend on each other? Well, you could think about people's station in life. Let's say you're in an organization. There's a leader, okay? There's a leader of an organization, and then there is the people that are being led. Right? Let's call them subjects, for lack of a better term. So we have a leader and we have subjects. Okay. So the leader could be thought of as being high and the subjects as being low. But you see, if you ask the question, who's more important, you realize that it's hard to say. Why? Because the low people, the people who are low, the subjects, enable, first of all, they give the leader someone to lead. And also they carry out the ideas that the leader tells them to carry out. That is, each of these people who are supposedly low are actually enabling the high person, the leader, to do his job. And so that means that the leader depends on the people he's leading. Just as the people he's leading, in this case we think of them as being low, below the leader, well, the people he's leading also depend on the leader, because if the leader is not there, then there's no one to give instructions, there's no one to give them a sense of direction, and the people become lost. So indeed, in this case, we see that what is low depends on what is high. In this case, the people being led depend on the leader, but the leader also depends on the people being led. And so it's actually, in our society, we tend to classify people this way. That is, if you're the CEO of a company, you're better than the person who sweeps the floors. If you're the captain of the team, you're better than other people who are on the team that don't have, let's say, any leadership role. But this is a twisted way of looking at things. Actually, the two depend on each other, and without one, the rest can't survive. Without, let's say, citizens, there's no president. Without a president, there are no citizens. Without anybody cleaning the floors and the toilets, well, the people at the company cannot stay in peace. There'll be in trouble. Someone will have to go and clean up the place. But without the CEO and the leaders of the company, well, then there's no direction, and the entire company collapses as well. And this is what Lao Tzu is getting at here. Really, the high depends on the low, and the low depends on the high. The next line of this stanza says, before and after follow each other. So, which is a very curious thought. That is, before follows after, and after follows before. Okay, I mean, it makes sense that after before, no, I mean, what follows before is after. That makes sense. Something happened before, then later on, the after happens. But this one is saying that, okay, after follows before, we know that, but it's also saying that before follows after. Which is really interesting. What does that mean? Like, let's say, okay, so I threw a ball, and let's say I throw a stone and it breaks a window. Okay, so what's the before event? I threw a stone. What's the after event? The window broke. So would say the window breaking is happened after I threw the stone. That is, the breaking of the window followed the throwing of the stone. But you see here, the Tao Te Ching is saying more. It's saying that before follows after. What that means is that according to him, you can also look at it as the window broke first, then the stone was thrown. So if before follows after and after follows before, well, what does that tell us about time? Because time usually talks about an event before and an event after. If you're saying that after follows before follows after, then there's really no, see, that means that time doesn't make any sense. And that's what Lao Tzu is trying to get at here, is that time is an illusion. Time doesn't, we think that time exists, that things happen before and after. But what he's saying is that no, time doesn't actually exist. So why is this important? Well, it's important because if time doesn't exist, it means that the only moment that matters is now, the present moment. Everything else is an illusion. The future is your imagination of, it's just a thought in your mind. Think about it. Like, you're seated right now and let's say you're thinking about, waking up tomorrow. Okay, you're seated right now in your bed and think about waking up tomorrow. You see, you're not really living in the future. All you're doing is you have thoughts in your brain and you have thoughts of the future. You're not living in the future. You're thinking about what you call the future, but in the present moment. So everything really happened in the present. And when you actually wake up tomorrow, well, that will also be the present moment. That is, the only time that really exists is now. Before and after are illusions. There's no such thing as yesterday or tomorrow, just now. So that's the only real thing there is. And this is important because as a relentless man, well, there are lots of things you're going to need to be doing. For instance, maybe you'll be working on a craft. To successfully work on your craft, you have to be able to live in the moment. That is, if you're practicing, let's say for a game that you're going to play in 6 months, you can't be thinking about what's going to happen 6 months from now. Rather, what you want to be focused on is playing well today, practicing well today, doing everything to the best of your ability now, because that's the only thing that matters. And 6 months from now, when you get on the pitch and actually play the game, it will also be now. There is no future, there is no past. And once you begin to give the present moment everything you got and abandon the past and the future, you'll be amazed at how much better you're able to do things. This is a little paradoxical, but it actually makes a lot of sense. And it's something that, for a relentless man, is just, it's something that really needs to be learned. Because even, let's talk about just relationships. What makes relationship work? Because in order to get to where you're trying to go, you're going to need people. That means you're going to need great relationships. Maybe you're going to need, you might have a wife or girlfriend or kids that you need to take care of, and you need to be in great relationship with them. Well, what ensures that you're in a great relationship with someone is the way you ensure that is that when you're with them, you're really with them. If you're talking to someone, you're not thinking about the future or the past. You're completely focused on them. Perhaps you're looking them in the eyes. Perhaps you're intently listening and engaging with what they're saying. And people can sense when you're really there and when you're physically there, but your mind is wandering. And naturally, you connect more with people. You connect better with people when you're completely present and in the moment with them. When you're completely there and you're in the now, sharing the moment with them. When you do this, every minute becomes priceless. And that's what makes the relationship work. So yes, it's really not an option. Again, I'm no master at living in the present. It's something that I am also practicing every single day. Every single day when I see my mind, my focus shifting, I pull it back to the present moment. It is a practice, and if you practice pulling yourself the present moment, being in the now, you become better at it. And it also means that everything that you do becomes done much better. It's like life is infused into it, as opposed to mindlessly doing tasks while thinking about other things. Alright, the next stanza of verse 2 is, "Therefore the master acts without doing anything and teaches without saying anything." So this is pretty paradoxical. What does it mean? The master acts without doing anything. Ultimately, if you're a relentless man, then you're trying to become a master at something. So now they're telling you, okay, if you're really a master, you must get to the point where you're able to act without doing anything. If you're acting, doesn't that mean that you're doing something? Lao Tzu says no. What he means by this is that, I don't know if you've ever observed like an exceptional performer. Let's say, I don't know if you're into soccer, but there's this player called Lionel Messi, arguably the greatest soccer player that ever lived. And if you watch Lionel Messi play soccer, it's so effortless. It just seems like he's gliding with the ball, that things are just happening naturally. It doesn't seem like he's expending any energy into anything that he's doing, right? That sensation you get that he isn't doing anything. It's like things are just happening. That's one of the marks of a true master. And usually it happens when, as we've been talking about the laws before, laws, everything operates by laws. Once you learn the laws by which something operates and you're able to work in perfect accordance with the laws, you appear to not be doing anything. So for instance, like there's a law of gravity, right? If you drop an object from the top of a building, it just falls. Let's say you drop a stone from the top of a building, it just falls on the ground. The stone doesn't seem to be doing anything. Why? Gravity is acting. It's working in accordance with nature. The laws are acting upon it, and it's just being propelled or pushed to the ground. And this is the sensation you get whatever you're doing. Let's say one of your crafts is playing the piano. The time when you really mastered how to play the piano will be when you understand the laws of the piano so well that when you're playing, it doesn't seem like you're doing anything. That is, it's like you're just following the laws of playing the piano. And so those laws are acting upon you. You're just gliding through, See, that's what it means to act without doing anything. And that's the height of mastery and learning. If you've really learned something, one test to know if you've learned something, and we talked about this before, was minimal force, was the idea I talked about, where you're able to do something with no effort. And if you're not doing something with effort, you're not really doing anything. Rather, the laws are doing things to you. It's a strange concept there, but yes, that's one of the things that a master has to be able to do. The master acts without doing anything. And the second part is he teaches without saying anything. What does that mean? What does it mean to teach without saying anything? Usually we think of, if I'm going to teach you something, I have to tell you all about it. When you go to class and the teacher is trying to, teach you about the French Revolution, they tell you all these facts about the French Revolution. But see, Lao Tzu is saying that's a sign of a poor teacher. A real teacher, a real master, is able to teach without saying anything. To teach without saying anything means, for instance, there's this method called the Socratic method, where, let's say, Socrates was credited with it, where he asks someone a series of questions and the person comes up with the answers for themselves. So, for instance, if I wanted to teach you about, let's say I wanted to teach you how to wrestle, okay? One way I could do is to tell you, you grab the person like that and you grab them there and blah, blah, blah. Another way, maybe wrestling is difficult because I'm not a wrestler myself. Let's say you're trying to teach someone how to shoot a basket, right? You want to teach them how to throw a basketball into a net. Well, one way you could do that is by telling them, you stand like this, you hold the ball like that, and you throw it. Another way to teach them would be to just give them the ball and let them start shooting. And I mean, if it's the first time ever, they might shoot and miss the ball. And then you could ask them a question. Well, why didn't the ball go in? And they'd be like, okay, maybe I was bending my knees too much. They try to raise their knees a bit and they shoot and it goes out. And like, what happened this time? And in this process, you haven't told the student anything. You haven't told them how to throw the ball. But you've taught them a lot, because eventually, due to your guidance, they end up discovering how to throw the ball, because the process will come to an end. If you get someone to rigorously keep asking themselves the question, well, why did I miss this basket? And to legitimately try to find an answer and work in accordance with that answer, eventually they'll actually figure out how to throw the basket. In this case, you've taught the individual how to throw a basket without saying anything to them. You didn't tell them anything. You just guided them to the point where they were able to question themselves, and they took over the process. So you taught them a lot without saying anything. And this is, I think, what Lao Tzu here means by saying, when you become a true master, you're able to teach without saying anything. Oh, and yes, and you might be wondering, well, but yeah, I mean, I'm a relentless man. I wanna transform my society by doing really incredible things, but why do I need to be a teacher? This whole thing about teaching doesn't really apply to me. Well, that's where you're wrong. As we mentioned before, if you're relentless, if you're dying empty, if you're pushing to the edge of your potential, you inspire people. People come to you. They want to know how you do what you do. They want you to help them answer various questions about their lives. They're looking at you for guidance. What does it mean if people are looking to you for guidance? Well, it means that you're their teacher. They want you to teach them. And so you see, again, just as being a relentless man cannot be separated from that, just as realizing your potential, maximizing your potential and dying empty cannot be separated with becoming a leader, it can also not be separated with becoming a teacher. So really, a relentless man is also a teacher. So when you reach this point where you've been so far along the process of every day dying empty, every day pushing to your limits, and you reach the point where you're inspiring people and people are coming to you for help, they're coming to you to teach them. How will you teach them? And Lao Tzu is explaining exactly how you do it. You teach them by not saying anything. The next line of this stanza is, things arise and she lets them come. Things disappear and she lets them go. So here he's giving the master the feminine gender. He's saying things arise and she lets them come. Things disappear and she lets them go. Okay, so first question. Why is Lao Tzu using the she in this situation? Well, I mean, part of it, think about the female sexual organ, the vagina. What does it do? Well, during sexual intercourse, the vagina expands and it allows the penis to come in. It doesn't resist the penis, it allows the penis to come in. And then after a while, obviously, the guy withdraws the penis. And what happens to the vagina? It contracts. It lets the penis go. Right? So that's a very feminine principle. Allow things and without judging or fighting them. And when the things go, you're not attached to them. You let them go. That's a female feminine principle. And that's something that, is important for a relentless man because, and that's what he's talking about here, is things arise and she lets them come. Things disappear and she lets them go. Because why this is important for a relentless man is because, well, usually if you're a relentless man, you're working at the edges of your ability. You're doing things you're not able to do. By definition, what that means is that things will happen to you that are very sudden. You expected one thing, but another thing happened. Let's say you're working on a project and you've been maybe working in an office and you've spent a lot of time working on this project and writing down everything correctly. And what if like a hurricane comes and hits the office in which you're working and suddenly all of your papers are drenched up and destroyed and you got to start from scratch on a project that you've taken 6 months to do. Okay. So that's an unexpected event. So if you're really a master, if you're really a relentless man, then when the storm happens, you allow it to come. As you don't resist unexpected things. You allow them to come. And you also don't get attached to things when they leave you. Let's say you're doing a project and let's say there's been someone on your team that's been helping you a lot with, let's say, certain part. Maybe someone has been funding the project. You've been so attached to them funding the project. And then one day they decide, okay, you know what? I'm not gonna fund your project anymore. I'm gonna move to a different part of the country, or I've decided to put my money elsewhere. Now, the ordinary person in such situations, most people, well, they're gonna be depressed, they're gonna be sad, they're gonna cry, they're gonna go into mourning. But for a relentless man, well, just as you allow things to come, you also allow them to go. You're not attached to anyone's money. If the investor withdraws their money, you allow them to leave with the money. You're not attached to it. You immediately maybe move into looking for different options. But this is an important key lesson we learned from the Tao Te Ching. That is surrendering. It's really strange, but you surrender to the present moment. When things come, you let them come. When things go, you let them go. And then the next line of this stanza says, she has, again, talk about the master. She has, but doesn't possess, acts, but doesn't expect. So what does it mean to have something, but not possess it? Well, for instance, here what he's talking about is when you possess something, you're attached to it. You're strongly attached to it. So for instance, well, let's say right now you have a phone. So you have the phone, right? It's your phone at the moment. But if you are possessing that phone, what that means is that if I stole the phone from you, the phone broke, you'd be depressed and sad and completely unable to continue. Once that happens, when you go into grieving over something that you've lost, that's a sign that you possessed that thing. You didn't have it, you possessed it. And so that's again another sign of, that's one of the things that a master doesn't do, a relentless man doesn't do, because, and this applies really well with ideas, right? So for instance, as you're working in your field, well, you're going to have certain ideas about how things work. Well, very likely it's possible that, obviously not all of your ideas are correct. Some of them are wrong, right? So you can have an idea, you can have an opinion, but you don't possess the opinion. What this means is that if you have an opinion and don't possess it, then when someone attacks the opinion, you don't feel like you're personally being attacked, because you're not possessing you're not attached to the opinion. It's just something you have because you believe that's what's right. If someone attacks it or they tell you why your opinion is wrong, you just switch it, right? And you either abandon it to take on a different opinion or abandon opinions altogether. But if you possess the opinion, then the opinion becomes part of you. Now, any attack is not just an attack on the idea, it's an attack on you. And so it's very personal. And this is what happens when you have let's say, really religious people who are convinced that the way they view the world is exactly how everybody should view it. For instance, maybe they believe that, the world was created in 6 days. Someone completely believes this and they take this to be literally true. Now, if that's your opinion and you possess that opinion, what happens if someone tells you, no, evolution happened, the world was actually created in millions of years, etc. Now it doesn't feel like an attack on the idea, it's an attack on yourself. And then you find people, it usually happens a lot, not necessarily in religion, but in many fields, it happens where you become so attached. You possess an idea, a concept, a belief system so much that you stick to it even when it doesn't serve you anymore. So maybe you've created a reputation with your friends that you're the sort of person who answers emails within 5 minutes of getting the email. Now, usually emails are very, very destructive towards you doing meaningful work, right? Because if you're constantly being distracted every 5 minutes, you can't do any work of meaning. It's very hard to do that, right? But let's say you've been telling people that, look, I always answer emails in 5 minutes within the time that it was sent to me. If now you're attached to this opinion, if you're attached to this image of yourself, then what happens is, even after you learn that emails are stopping you from doing meaningful work, and that having to answer emails all the time is actually holding you back from realizing your true potential, even when you know all of that, usually what's going to happen is that you're still going to stick to answering every email that comes immediately. Why? Because you don't just possess this opinion that you don't have the belief that it's a good thing to answer emails immediately they come. You possess that belief. And that's why it becomes very hard for you to change, even when presented with contrary evidence. But you see, being a master, dying empty, is all about being flexible. It's all about not being attached to any belief or particular way of doing things, because happens often that they show you that the way you're doing things is wrong or there's a better way. You want to be able to be flexible and do what moves you towards your goals, what serves you, as opposed to just being stuck and possessing ideas, possessing a way of doing things, possessing things that no longer help you anymore. So that's what it means here by the master has. She has, but doesn't possess. Right? She has, but doesn't possess, right? And then the second part of it is, she has, but doesn't possess, and acts, but doesn't expect. What does that mean? Acting without expectation. So usually, and this is completely different from what many of us are taught about how to do things. Usually, when we're acting, we're always expecting, right? It's like, well, why do you engage in a wrestling match? To win. You're expecting to win. Why do you eat food? You're expecting to get full. Why do you leave your house to walk? You're expecting to get to your destination. Lao Tzu says this is the reverse. You want to get to the point where you're able to act without expectations. What that means is that you don't expect anything. If you don't expect anything, you're able to welcome whatever comes to you. So for instance, if let's say you walk to the dining hall with the expectation of eating, if you're really expecting to eat and you get to the dining hall and maybe it's closed, you misread the time, now you're depressed, now you're angry, right? Because your expectation wasn't met. You expected to eat and now you can't even get into the dining hall. But if you went to the dining hall without expecting anything, then if you arrive there and they tell you, oh yeah, there's no food, you're like, okay, right? Not as bad because you didn't expect anything. When you expect things to be a certain way and you're attached to this expectation and desire, usually what happens is you open yourself up to be even more disappointed. So when you interact with people and you expect them to make you happy, then when they don't make you happy or they behave in a way that you don't expect, now you become depressed, now you become angry, now you become disappointed, and now you're facing a lot of emotional repercussions. And that's the consequence of expecting things. And usually what happens is acting without expectation is really a powerful concept, because if you're able to act without expectations, what it means is that because expectations are in the future, think about it. You're working on a project now, but you're thinking about, oh wow, the promotion you're going to get when you get the project done. When you do that, you're living in the future. You're not in the present moment. And so whatever you're doing right now is not done to the best of its quality, because part of your mind is just focused on the promotion you're going to get. But if you focus your mind completely on doing the work that you're doing and you're not expecting anything, that is, at the end of the project, well, they may promote you or they may not. But you see, if it doesn't matter to you. If you get promoted, good. If you don't get promoted, good. You didn't expect anything. It just happened. Whatever happens, you embrace it. You do your part and then you embrace the outcome is the idea. So this is, again, I have to contend, it's not an easy thing to do. It's something that I am working on myself. I practice that every single day, trying to act without expectations. All right, we've gone a little too long here. So thank you very much for listening to this podcast episode. Remember that this is your podcast and I am your servant. My mission in life is to help men die empty. It's to help you realize your true potential. Why is this important? Because the world is filled with problems. We have corrupt governments. We have people in the world that don't have any food and dying of starvation. We have people in the world that don't believe in themselves, people who are extremely poor. We have people in the world who never get a good quality education. We have people in the world that are suffering from terrible diseases, Alzheimer's, etc. Well, the way the world is going right now, we have a lot of political conflict. That's another major problem. In fact, just the projection of population growth tells us if we don't do something dramatic, the human race will very likely be extinct. All these are big problems out there. And you see, you have within you is so much greatness. That means that you can do something. You can tackle these major challenges. And that's another thing that excites me about making this podcast, because if you realize who you truly are, if you realize the potential that you have, if you realize the power, the things that you can accomplish, then you'll be able to tackle some of these challenges that seem impossible to us, some of these challenges that are making life really difficult for many people on the planet. Once you realize your potential, you'll be able to tackle these problems. And this will enable you to not only fulfill your own potential, but enable other human beings to fulfill their own potential. You have within you the capacity to solve major problems facing the world. And you have within you the capacity to transform humanity and how we view the world. That's what gets me excited, and that's what this podcast is all about. Presenting you with the ideas that you need so that you can discover for yourself who you are, discover for yourself the mindset that you need to have in order to realize your true potential and thus die empty. If you have any ideas about the podcast, if you have any questions, if anything is holding you back from realizing your true potential, from dying empty, please let me know about it. My email is in the episode description. Otherwise, thank you once again for listening and have a relentless week. Bye.